Welcome back to the Voices from the House of Zophiel. Today we have Scarlett Amaris. She's a screenwriter, author, and researcher. She's also co-written scripts for The Colour Out of Space starring Nicolas Cage and The Theatre Bizarre, amongst others. Scarlett was a featured writer for the HERETIC magazine and has co-written the dark fantasy trilogy SAURIMONDE. She directed the music video Nail Me Down by Scarlett Seraphim. Currently, she has television and feature film projects in development. Prior to this, she created lecture series on the modern history of witchcraft and the Deity is in the Details, which is a deep dive into the historical and mythological backgrounds of gods and goddesses from various pantheons. Scarlett is a well-regarded authority on alternative history. Her research has been featured in numerous books and anthologies, and she has taught and explored the history, mythology, and various worshipping practices in the ancient world to the present day. So I have great pleasure in welcoming Scarlett to the show today. Hello, Scarlett.
Hello, that was quite the intro. Thank you so much.
Well, yes, I mean, I think that people should know your background, and I just like to ensure that people's minds are focused in the right direction. So it's lovely to have you on the show.
Thank
Um,
you.
I'm going to ask you some questions, obviously, and then all I'm going to do is listen to what you have to say. But at certain points, I may ask you more for the benefit of the listeners who may not be so clear about some things, or maybe they need to know more. So that's all I'm going to do. Okay.
Can I ask you questions as well?
You can ask me anything you like,
Okay.
absolutely anything you like. I can't pretend I might know the answer. All right. But I might lie to you marvelously and just blag my way through it. Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So my first question is, Scarlett, how did you arrive at your interest in the occult?
It's a very interesting question. I think I think I've always had it. Some of my very earliest memories are putting spells together, essentially, like grabbing rocks and sticks and stones and flowers and this and that, and having to put circles around things and protection around things. And I grew up on a horse ranch, and so and with many, many, many acres, and so I spent a lot of time on my own, and so I developed a relationship with nature that I think is a little different than what kids have today. And also, I grew up in a time where my parents were like, as long as you don't die and you come back by 10, you can go do whatever you want. And so, I got to be really kind of wild out in nature. And I think that sort of shaped my worldview. Also, I grew up riding, and so riding horses. And so, from a very young age, I learned to develop, or I developed, I should say, a way of speaking that doesn't have to do with words. It has to do with emotion. It has to do with action and reaction. You're developing a vocabulary with a creature, a sentient creature that you don't have you're finding common ground with a sentient creature that you don't speak the same language. And I think for magic that's imperative. I think that really helps you develop this skill that helps you interact with the unseen world. I mean, probably because I spent so much time on my own, I was a creepy kid. Like I always liked the nighttime. I always liked mysteries. I was obsessed with In Search of. I would watch that obsessively when I was a kid, and oh my gosh, when they had the article about human self-combustion, like I was freaked out. I started reading horror novels very early on, and like I was a goth when I was 14, and that has not changed. Like once I discovered music, it was game over.
Yeah.
And I when I was 14 too, I moved from Los Angeles to a suburb outside of Chicago, and it was like night and day. And I was so pissed off and I hated all the people there and they were so uptight.
Mm.
But there was a library in it was in Hinsdale. There was this library that somebody had stuffed full of books by Crowley and all these different witchcraft
Oh,
books and esoteric books. It's the first time I came across Una's work. And so I spent the whole winter, that first winter, like at this library in front of this fire, reading book after book after book. And I don't know who put those books there, but
that's
I'm so
quite,
thankful.
right. That's quite unique, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
It was very, very, very odd that they would have like such I guess they called it metaphysical at the time because it had a different word back then.
Mm.
And then when I moved to Chicago when I was 17, the occult bookstore was just down the way. And so I kind of like got a little bit of inroads there, but I was more interested in shamanism. Like, it took me a minute to get to witchcraft. I was really more interested in, you know, journeying to the what's it or the other world, this
Mm.
world that I would see in dreams and see in visions and whatever, but I was really interested in ecstatic states and visionary experiences. And so that was kind of my way in. But I've always, even when I had a more proper job, like when I was a professional dressage rider, I still was working in the biomechanics of writing because I wanted to know how it worked, but I also wanted to understand how we create this conversation between this animal and us, and how we hit these different zones in sports psychology. Like where is that place that we go to? Because I find that that zone is very similar to the betwixt and the between that we have when we go into ritual and witchcraft. It's the same. I'm convinced it's the same place in writing that you get to as flow. It's
Yeah,
all
right.
the same state.
I was good. Right, you're there. You got there right before me with Flo Cheeks on my ahi. Right, not the easiest guy's name to pronounce. And that I actually admire the flow model, even though people have tried to do things with it or whatever. But what I appreciated more than anything was that space of flow. That I agree with you that it draws you into this liminal nature of things where it's you and it, musicians are drawn to it, painters, people who do stuff, even scientists who get drawn into that liminal space because they are that thing.
Yeah.
And you're kind of removed from your concept of society or your present society, and you're on the fringes and the edges when it becomes like this, and then grand things happen to you.
Yeah,
Maybe not all
exactly.
the time, but the magical systems of where we talk about this a lot. I mean, these days people talk about the occult and the esoteric quite liberally. I'm not saying I agree with all of it really, but I do share with other people this idea of experiencing the outer rims of life
Yeah,
itself. So I love
and
that,
I
Carla.
yeah, and I think that that's really the journey that I've been on for a very long time.
Mhm.
And I came to realize at some point, I was a painter as well. I actually went to the Art Institute of Chicago. And then I realized one day that I didn't love, and I painted well, but I didn't love painting the way that I loved writing. Writing is a
Right.
compulsion for me that
Yeah,
I cannot
yeah,
stop.
yeah.
But, there was a point in my life when, one, I didn't want an ordinary life. I never wanted that. But also, I have this radical belief that creativity is the greatest gift that we have ever been given. That it is our greatest gift. That is the thing that makes us so special.
Right.
And I have always put 100% of my belief in my creativity, whether it be dreams, whether, however that is. Like, it's the number one important thing in my life, which means that I don't have a very stereotypical worldview. I have a very magical worldview.
Mm.
And I believe in coincidences. I believe in miracles. I believe in all of that. And I believe that reality is very malleable. I think that we really have a hand in how we create it around us. And I have seen things happen and had things happen to me that there's no rational explanation because they're not rational.
Right.
And I love that.
Yes. Yeah. I feel driven to tell you something now.
Am I
I
going to be scared?
No, creativity is probably the single most important thing for me in my life, because all the way up to recently, it is kind of one of those things that I got wrapped up in from being a child to now. But in my research, my recent research, my doctoral thesis, please don't read it because it's just so, God, no. However, there's one point, I think the whole 10,000, whatever, 100,000 word essay, whatever it is that I did, and it killed me to do it. I found out one thing, and that is that when I was researching what is creativity anyway, I could not find the answer. Now, that wasn't the most incredible thing I found out. I couldn't find the answer because it is a very slippery kind of thing. But what I did find out is creativity entwines the unconscious and the conscious state. Now,
Yeah.
if that is not I'll go cold now again. But if that is not that very great serpentine entwinement of life itself, and creativity is the spark that does it,
Yep.
I don't think, I mean, yeah, maybe I think that's what people are searching for, but they just don't know it. And when people have got it, they know it, or they know it in a particular form, and it gives voice to the unspeakable, right? That expression.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is
No.
why I'm sorry, I interrupted you, but I try very hard, like anytime that I have lectured or talked, to really impress this point home. Like, this is the most important thing, because I find, especially in culture in the last, I would say 20, 25 years, that there's been a real step away from it. There, like the defunding of the arts in the school, like no daydreaming, no this, no that. And it's like, no, daydream. Dreams are important. What you have, what you bring from inside of you is important.
Yeah.
And there's just such a step away from that I think that that's really what a lot of people are searching for.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Mm.
We bring forth from within and we transmute it, all of our experiences, all of our pain, all of our joys, all of our everything, and we bring it forth it into a way that somebody else can experience or learn from.
Yeah.
That's the importance of us being here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you can pick up. I mean, my first degree was fine art, right? So off I went, and I spent a glorious 3 years in Bath, off my head basically on anything I could get my hands on, and painted all day and night. And I can barely remember some of it, but it was wild, right? It was absolutely wild. I loved every single second of it, I believe, right? And the thing is that the creative act is a deeply plastic, it's a plastic philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, people do it in different ways, like through writing and music and poetry and dancing and acting and stuff like that. It's something that we need to do. And I find these days, in this so-called 21st century now, that the general melee of what's happening is that almost creativity is given a bit of a pushback. And this is why some of the stuff that's going on is going on, even though it's disguised as something else. It is a very almost universal anarchic act of breaking down the rules and boundaries.
Yeah, it's a radical act now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And yet we need it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I was asking you about how you got to the occult, Scarlett. We can digress, right? But lovely.
I was like, and now I'm gonna go off on tangents because that's what I do. But I mean, that's, like it's been a very, I can't say that I had a straight line to the occult. It's been a very circuitous journey. There's a lot of things that I've been interested but anything that's ever caught my interest, like I'm one of those people that it's not okay for me to study to practice witchcraft. Like if I practice witchcraft, I need to know where it comes from.
Right.
If I'm going to work with a certain deity, I need to know everything about them. Like I'm that person who will follow it back to the source because that's important to me.
Mm.
And it fascinates me,
Yeah.
and so I've gone in many, I feel so old now, but I've gone in so many different directions. But it all basically always circles back to the same thing. But it's always been whatever I've been interested in at the time. Like I always immerse myself and deep dive into it to really to know what that is. And I've come to realize that even if it's shamanism, witchcraft, ceremonial magic, like they all intersect at some
Mm.
point. Even doing like all of the different gods from the different pantheons, when you follow it far enough back, they all intersect somewhere. There's
Mm.
always commonalities, and that's always really fascinated me,
Mm.
like trying to get back to the origins of that.
I like these descriptions. And at the same time, you're telling me that your love is to write.
Yes.
And if you just combine those two things together, I'm wondering if you could talk to us about the work you do.
Sure.
The work you do to
So
talk about anything, but the work you do today, I think a lot of that is current, but also it's pulled you there.
yeah, I mean, so I've been doing a lot of screenwriting, and I have been on developing this really big television project for the last few years with a very good TV writer, Adria Lang, and a very big production company behind us. And it's been funny how this idea, like we met, and this idea has snowballed so and become such a behemoth, but
Yeah.
it has to do with so the women behind the Universal monsters. And like as a creepy kid growing up, I love the Universal monsters. They're like beloved figures, to me. But also in this project, I've been allowed to, like I've gone back to the writers, and Mary Shelley is one of my heroes.
Right.
And I've also gone and used all the source material that they were pulling from, plus using the magic at the time that these different texts were written, and in, like recreating this universe. But it's that's what I really love. And like you're recreating a new universe, but you're also understanding the esoteric principles that were going on, let's say in the fin de siècle in Paris and in London, and what's going on with the magical lodges, and trying to, even though you're creating a new world, it's still anchored in things that were happening at the time. And so it gives it more of a realism. I've been doing that, which I absolutely, absolutely love. And then I've also been working on scripts where I just did a rewrite of Algernon Blackwood's Ancient Sorceries. And I don't think anybody's ever adapted Ancient Sorceries before. And it's a script called Hellbore. And I modernized it, which was the same thing that was done to Color Out of Space. And I have to say that it is the most psychedelic, messed up, psychotic script that I've ever written, and that I'm really proud of it. Like it really, and it is really magical, but it's magical in a way that I think Algernon would be both horrified with, and yet he would be smiling because it's true to his original thought at the time.
Right. I've only read one thing by him. And
What have you
actually, because you mentioned it once, and I thought I need to buy it. Sand, is it?
Oh yeah, Sand is great.
Oh my God, it scared the shit out of me at some points. It's like one of those things that you just think, I can't do this right now, and you have to find a and then you're glued.
Yeah.
Once you
Yes.
go through that, wow, and it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, you know, Algernon was so huge in his time, and he was such a top weird fiction writer, and he's been kind of lost. Like Lovecraft is definitely the bigger name, but I
Mm.
much prefer Algernon Blackwood because when I read his stuff, some of his experiences mirror my own. I have the feeling that, and he was really there, and he was very much, he was in magical orders. He was an outdoorsman. He spent time in Egypt. Like you can tell when you read Sand.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, and those descriptions out in the desert and the things dropping from the sky, and like
Yeah.
he's doing what I'm talking about. He's giving form to the unknowable,
Right.
and it's brilliant. I think he's a genius. I really do. I think and it's unfortunate that he's been lost a little bit with the mists of time, but wow.
Well, maybe this will kind of springboard it up again somehow. But um, you just said a lovely phrase there. I'm writing it down. Uh,
What was that?
Giving form to the unknowable. It's a brilliant expression. I think that just kind of sums up quite a lot of magical practice, actually.
Yeah.
And I think I'm gonna let you carry on now, but I think what you're saying is that through writing, through how you're influenced, through who influenced you, your childhood to the present day, and now you're creating films, videos, pieces of time, I suppose.
Yeah.
That I think it's important to help others understand what these ideas are, these processes, what being interested in the Gothic is, of course. All right. And I think that, I mean, there are a lot of goths around the world, as we know. And I do know quite a few, right? I'm not myself, but I do. And I do find the goths that I do know that almost listen through the music and look through even the comics and the books they read and whatever, and it takes a life of its own. It has a certain substance, and
Yeah.
they are really creating something, and so it
Yeah.
exists.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I was talking on another podcast. I think it was last week or maybe the week before, and we were discussing the Necronomicon, and I said just because it was a fictional conceit of Lovecraft's, look at how many versions of it. Doesn't mean that it doesn't actually exist. Maybe not in the form that he, it's like a tulpa, it's not in the form that he imagined, but it exists today. And it
Right.
exists in many forms, and it keeps existing in more forms. So who knows what it's going to do 10 years from now,
Mm.
but yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, I was one of those goth kids too. Like I can remember I shouldn't admit this is so embarrassing, but like I can remember getting Fields of the Nephilim records, because records back in the day, and like they would write like little glyph things like in the center of the record, and I would be like, "What is
Yeah.
that? What
Yeah.
magical message is this? Wait, what are all these ruins?" Like I would sit there and decode
Mm.
everything
Mm.
obsessively, and it's the same for quite a few different bands, and like listen to the lyrics and try and figure out like what
Yeah.
these things are that they're talking about.
Yeah.
I would say that Fields are probably very, very guilty of creating an obsessive generation of goths that are always looking for esoteric meaning in all kinds of things, whether they realized they were doing it or not.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think I'm older than you. I don't want to know your age. I'm just thinking I'm older than you because I hark back to early romantic punk rock in lots of ways. And that's the kind of stuff that I went through. And my parents despaired really because my bedroom was a crypt and I'd paint all sorts of freaky gothic horror things and pretend I was dead quite a lot of the
Oh
time. Yeah, I was a vampire, but not quite made it. Right. And I was really into, in fact, now I've kind of slightly got a penchant for things like this. But it is a very interesting thing. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I'm going to ask you a little bit now about the music video and what you're doing. But just to say, I have watched this several times. And while I do things like that, I need to get engrossed in the whole thing. And I felt that the video was beautifully Byron-esque.
I love this term, and I asked this already, but like I've heard people say it's very Lynchian, which I is the ultimate compliment to
Oh,
me. Byron-esque, like tell me what
I'll
that
tell
means.
you what it is in my Brit kind of way. All right, here we are. So, all things Byron, etc., is that kind of gloomy, romantic theme where there's something about passion within it at the same time. But there's a certain amount of where the characters are, there's a certain, and this is very uh, not vampiric in the way that you just like destroy other people, but vampiric in the way that you're a certain kind of aloofness and arrogance to the whole thing because that's what you are and drift through. And this non-reality reality thing that is almost self-destructive
Mhm.
in its essence. So all Byron's heroes were self-destructive, including himself. So you get this huge, romantic, beautiful, glorious, passionate, gloomy, but self-arrogance that comes through. And it's a whole thing around a lot of Gothic things that I know Shelley, I mean Shelley, right? Etc. But Byron kind of just took it on himself to try and embody this thing in his whole life, which I mean, even I talked about this a few weeks ago with somebody that came up that in a different context, but there's a painting, I can't remember who it is, I'm really sorry, but there's a painting of Byron's death. And there are these guys and they're standing on the beach, cremating his body on the beach, right? And you just look at this and you think, Jesus, right? Wow, what an awesome and terrible, in its truest sense, painting. It's
Yeah,
terrifying and it's beautiful. And
yeah,
that essence of somebody's looking away and somebody's looking at it, and then there's just these plumes of smoke that actually his body has been engulfed in flames. It's just after the flames. That's gothic to me.
yeah, exactly. And I think you hit it on the nail on the head when you say beauty and terror. Like that combination.
Right. So
That's
can you tell us
uh,
about Nail Me Down?
sure. So I've known Scarlett for a while, and she is tremendously talented. Like she's this young, wise, beautiful, talented girl. I mean, just amazing. And I think we were at a barbecue, and she was telling me this idea for the music video. And then I just started to bounce ideas back and forth with her.
Mm.
And she said, "Hey, and she really liked it. And she was like, could I come over sometime and we could flesh out a character arc?" And I said, "Sure, like let's do it, come." And so she did that. And at the end of it, she said, "Would you direct the video for me?" And I was like, I've directed small things, but I've never directed a music video. And I told her, like, it'll be very narrative, like, because I know how to do short films. And, I was that kid, like, I grew up with MTV. And so I grew up with all those crazy Adamant videos and, like all those narrative videos. I didn't grow up with the product placement. Here I am with my cool guitar and my tattoos and my piercings, and I look
Yeah,
larger than life.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't grow up with that shit. Like, I grew up with these really, that were things that were more like, you had characters and they were more like short films. So, and she said, great. And then we had the writer's strike going on, and a lot of people were sitting around with nothing to do. And so I gathered a crew, and I got people that I probably normally would not have been able to get. And we went out and shot. And I had already, like I had a script that we were shooting from, and I had created a mood board. Like I do that for, any project that I'm on, I create extensive playlists, I create extensive picture lists and mood boards, character boards.
Hmm.
I do all the visuals as well. So, and I had been watching Lost Highway. Like I had a whole bunch of different references that I had pulled for because I knew instinctively what I wanted the feel and the tone to be. I just didn't always know exactly what it was going to look like. And then once we started shooting, I had a much better sense of it. And then when we went back to shoot the pickups, um, we shot in a different location, and there was this fantastic old tree. I was walking by the tree and I was shaking I had these two Arctic flashlights, and I was shaking the flashlights, and all of a sudden I realized they had a shutter function, and they started to shutter on the tree, and I was like, go get in that tree. So we shot her in the tree with just the flashlights on her, and that's when all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, this is tapping into the Lilith myths. Like she's like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Like she's in, Lilith in the Epic of Gilgamesh is in the center of the Halupa tree, and she really is kind of like the mediator between the heavens above and the world below. Like she's the crux in the crossroads. And so I stuck her up in that tree. And then it just happened to be that in some of the B-roll stuff that we had the owls. And so once that started to play, I was like, okay, we can play a little bit here in the edit with the myth of Lilith and make this a lot more, it's very dreamlike and it's very nightmarish, but there's a real ambiguity between who's the hunter and who's the hunted. And that's something that we wanted all along. But
Yes.
we also wanted it to have this very magical feel to it. And I think that there's, like I see the hand of Lilith in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like her hand is firmly in the shoot. And so this, Scarlett is a practicing magician. And so, her the work that she's working with, she's also working with dreams. She's also working in magical realities and in that kind of way. I was very lucky to have an excellent editor who just also, is magical. And so we were able to all come together. Like I knew that I could leave something with her and she would understand what I meant. I didn't have to educate her in what I was, in liminality, in
Right.
what these terms were. She already understood that. And so we already had that common language. And I think that we were able to pull that together.
The other thing I felt, yeah, was Grimm
Yeah.
brothers. Right. Um,
Oh,
not Grimm with a yeah, you're a
yeah.
vessel, right? Because like most people will walk down the street going, yeah, you're a ferret, aren't you? But anyway, no. What I'm talking the Grimm's brothers and the original books and things like this, which I love to bits because again, they're super scary. Not
Yeah.
really written for kids, are they, I suppose?
Funny
And
enough, I
yeah.
just did my DNA. Like we never knew who my mother's side of the family was, and she's a Grimm from Germany.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, seriously.
In your blood, right. It's in
Yeah.
your blood. How fantastic is that? Because I was just going to mention that like fairy tales and how beautifully instructive they are, as you know this anyway. And yet you take a story, um, or part of my other work when I work with people is I ask them their favorite fairy tale, even if it were a film. And what generally happens is that they remember one from when they were about 12, puberty, something like this, because we're powering along at that age, 12, 13, that kind of stuff. And a lot of fairy stories that we remember are about our chemical reactions and changes and whatever, and it sounds very, very boring, but what it does is it leads you into this other realm of the self. And stories like Cinderella and
Sure.
you know, Rapunzel and Red Riding Hood. And when you talk about this essence of are you the hunter or hunted, there's something beautifully dark in Red Riding Hood that has been analyzed to death, right, by a million people. Okay. But right at the core of it is this rites of passage, but power
Yeah.
of being female. And yeah, and I've gone cold again. It's kind of in your stuff. It's kind of in your stuff. It's kind of in your video. And I just urge people to watch it.
Yeah, I also, I talk about the Lilith myths, but also something that Scarlett and I were actively discussing was sacred feminine rage. Like, what do you do with this? How do you transmute this? Because we are so taught not to be angry, not to be whatever. And I would say that is the worst joke that was ever played on women is to make them virginal or to make them be like a
Um,
woman who always forgives. Because when you go back to the original gods or the original goddesses of beauty, they're also goddesses of war. Like that dichotomy lives within them. That
yeah,
dichotomy lives with us and in the feminine, and it's been so butchered. And so we were talking about how do you transmute this sacred rage? Like
right.
like what is that? What is that intersection? And we had a lot of, we didn't come up with any answers,
Mm,
but we had a lot of interesting conversations about it and how to portray that in a way that is magical.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I do feel this is becoming voiced a lot better today than it used to be. I mean, how we perceive women, femininity, whatever that is, and it's not, or the feminine, sorry, that was a wrong word, feminine, and those getting rid of the patriarchy and getting to where it's at, which is the divine feminine.
Yeah.
So really, honestly, it's that. And a lot of men find that hard to kind of meet. I know a lot of our listeners who are men will not find that difficult to understand.
No, they won't. But
But
it's even not overthrowing the patriarchy. It's the I always call it like the rewilding, the unlearning of all of these terrible things that we have learned to be proper, to be quiet, to not shine, to not, and the things that we get snubbed for on a regular basis, and we
right,
still have to hold our ground. And you pay a terrible price for being authentically yourself as a woman in this society and for shining bright and for bringing your vision to the world.
right,
And it's a price, you have to stand in your power and be willing to pay that price.
yeah,
But it's getting better, but it's still not easy.
it's nowhere near where we want it to be,
No.
right? But it is. I do feel that there's a lot more people talking about it, which is great, including today, which is really important. So,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
also think like just before we were filming the video, her and I had just gone through breakups, and so that probably helped what we were doing at the time. It was like almost to the day. It was so funny. But anyway,
it's interesting how that sort of thing happens.
yeah,
Synchronicities and uh yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, synchronicities happen for a grand reason, and they're
yes,
they're incredibly important. Um, Going back to all sorts of really, really very excellent people who worked with the beginnings of psychotherapy, recognized that synchronicities were mechanisms that urged us to move, to heal, and to recognize the self in a symbolic way. And that seems very symbolic,
yeah,
which gives
yeah,
it power, right?
exactly. But I like this idea of looking at yourself in a symbolic way. Like I think that's very important, and I think that that's something that shows in the video. I mean, it is something we're talking about, but as women, we're taught not to do that. Like, oh, I can't be larger than life. I can't be symbolic. It's like, oh, yes, I can. Yes, I
Yes,
can.
you can. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely that. Absolutely that. Absolutely that. So you're doing this work at the moment. I mean, you mentioned we talked about this music video, and I'm sure there's lots of other things that are in your mind and you started to create and breathe life into. It's a bit
Yeah, I
back
I'm
to
working
show.
on another script right now that I'm having a little bit of a hard time with it, but that's life. I also just, sometimes I'll come up with these crazy ideas and then I force myself to, they're like an impulse, and then I force myself to act on them. And so I love when I have a group of people together and they're all creating together. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to create this night and I'm going to call it Death Prompt because that's really dark. And I'm going to have, it'll be in this room and I'll have the visuals going, like I'll have repetitive visuals, I'll have music, and I'll give them a different, very gothic prompt. But with like still fun though,
Yeah.
prompt every 15 minutes, and they can do painting, they can do drawing, they can do writing, they can do whatever they wish. And we'll do an hour and a half of this and be immersed in this. Like I want to do a breathing exercise before we go in so that we're all on the same kind of wavelength and
Mm.
that everybody can enter into this liminal space for an hour and a half. And I'll give them different prompts every 15 minutes so that they can just come out with a whole variety of things. So hopefully they can take one of those things and then use it for something else or something further. Like
Right.
like I said, it was an impulse. And then yesterday I was like, I'm going to do this. And so I made it happen.
Oh, right. I was going to say, because I wondered if that was something that you ran for
I
groups.
just, I literally just thought of it like 2 days ago. And then yesterday I talked with a friend of mine who has a store that I can do it at. And I was like, we're going to do this. Like, and so when I come up with impulses like that, I like to follow them through.
Yeah.
But
That,
even though
that do you
it's
know
out of my
you've
wheelhouse, but still.
you've done it again, Scarlett, because just mentioning that, this, that, and the other, I think a couple of the courses we ran recently um, in Britain, we know a lovely place. It's a wild place. It's an old mansion house. And we ran a course, and we're running another course there actually coming up to December, which is Lenny's on dark botanicals, killer cure poisons and stuff like that. That's her
Oh,
thing, is green witch stuff,
yeah.
right? That's her thing. Um, but this thing you mentioned, this I think that would be extremely popular in Britain
Oh, okay.
to
Yeah,
run
like
3 day workshop on that. I mean, we're quite happy to pull something together with you on that one.
that'd be awesome. I would be very open for that. Like I said, I really like, I have people that I mentor and people that study with me and whatever. And that's the big thing is like creativity and however you get to it and however you immerse yourself into these states. And like any way that I can facilitate that, I'm in. Like it is the radical act. I'm absolutely in. But
Yes.
I would love that. That'd be fantastic.
I think that's very doable for the British audience. I think they'd love that. I can almost hear them shouting at me now. Let's see what right, let's see what happens. I'm just wondering, I mean, this is like taking all these ideas and essences forward in a very um conclusive way that you produce something like a film. And yet I say that it has all sorts of feelings around it that you kind of recognize that um, you know about, but you never learned. I think we've talked in the past and things like archetypes, which you know about and stuff like this. So it pulls in those directions that are important to us as our um, becoming self. And I was just wondering that I wonder if people would like to know about which writers and artists and producers do you admire yourself?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, writers, obviously, I've already said Algernon Blackwood. I like a lot of the weird fiction writers. I admire like Morris Mogg. I admire his prose quite a bit. Lord Dunsany, love his prose. Like, I love these heavy prose writers, even though I don't write this way. Like, that's what I like to read. Um, I don't know about producers, but like as far as like directors, like I love Tarkovsky. I love yeah. Dezuazala, I think, is my favorite film. That's Kurosawa. Like I really, and I watch these things obsessively. Like I'm like terrible that way. I'm the kid that when Blade Runner came out, I skipped school for 2 weeks and I went to the matinee and watched it every single day because I loved that world and I wanted to be in that world. And it obsessed me.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
let's see, painters. I love, my favorite, a lot of the painters that I go back to over and over again are, the salons of the Rose and Cross that was that Sarpelladon was doing in Fin de Siècle Paris. Like I like a lot of those. And I think it's because it goes back to what I'm always looking for. Like they're very interested in magic. They're very interested in, pulling from the inner to the outer and how to show this in either a surrealistic way or a symbolic way.
Mm.
And so I always go back to a lot of those kind of paintings and from that era.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think somebody who I always get, I mean, when I see Odilon Redon's paintings in
Sure.
front of me, not a picture, but there,
Yeah.
you're almost brought to tears that it's just completely sublime, and it's
Yeah.
beautifully magical.
I have to say too, like, so I went to school I went to the School of Art Institute, and something that I used to do, like during lunch, is I would go up to the actual galleries and I would sit in front of the Caravaggios,
Mm.
and I would just look at how that skin was painted
Mm.
and the way that it glowed, because they use the pigment that we can't use anymore, and just the absolute and be enthralled by the beauty of it. And the same thing with like the anger. They have the Bacon painting there with the Pope with the two sides of beef. Like I would spend hours in front of it,
Yes,
absolutely hours,
yes.
and just be enthralled. And I still love Bacon. Like I pull from him all the time when I'm creating lookbooks and creating mood stuff for my different various projects.
Mm. I think that a lot of things that I've seen in film that remind me of Bacon is where maybe TV series, I suppose, where people are portrayed as possessed, and you get that very fractious movement
Yeah.
of things going on,
Yep.
and that just like in a whirlwind of the self. So
Yes.
you see other things, you see the animal self, and you see the deformed self, and you see the side of the self you can't face and stuff like this. Um, to which a lot of magical practice is looking towards the dark side of the self and realizing actually it's not so bad actually anyway.
No,
It's
it's true, but there's two types of possession too. There's, possession where you bring a godhead into you and you just step
oh yeah,
aside and you don't remember it. But there's also a possession where something else can come in and you have no control over what's going
right,
on. And I think that sometimes that harkens more to Bacon's work, where it's like you have one step there and then you're one step out and you see all of the shit happening around you and you're absolutely powerless
yeah,
to do
yeah,
anything about it until you can get this thing away from you, however you
yeah.
do that.
Or somebody helps you get that thing away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's plenty of good stories about that. Wow. I'm just gonna draw you to the future.
Sure.
So let's consider this interest in your video work, your film work, etc. Where's it going and where do you want it to be?
I would love to have a big television show. I'd love to be able to create bigger and bigger worlds. I'd love to be, I'd love to do more movies. I'd love to direct my own movies, hopefully in the next couple of years. Like I need a little bit more experience under my belt, but I have definitive vision. And
Right.
so and I definitely have a definitive style. And I think that and a very good arc of what I want to do. But yeah, I would like to create bigger worlds. I really would, and to be able to infuse those with magic. Like I'm not going to go start making murder mysteries.
Mm.
Like
Yeah. Right.
like I'm a one trick pony, and I
Yeah.
know what I'm good at, and I know where my obsessions lie, and it lies in the supernatural, it lies in magic, it lies in creating these universes that are infused, I guess, with Byronism, the Byronic.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would like to do bigger versions of that. That's what I would really love. And I would like to be able to hopefully encourage others to do so. And to keep spreading the message that creativity is the greatest gift we're ever given. Creativity is the greatest gift, and to keep nurturing that and fostering that within people.
So, oh, well, quite yes, I like that. It's about others too. I'm just thinking that if we began to think about this and to manifest this, what would help you?
Oh, I don't know. I think I'm on a pretty good path. Like I think that I'm actually doing fairly well. I think um that's a really interesting question. I don't actually have an answer for that.
Right.
I don't, it
Okay. Well,
it yeah.
I could ask you a different question.
Okay.
So, with this thought in mind and this pathway, this journey, what will get in your way?
Only me. I'm the only thing that gets in my way.
Right.
Yeah.
You were quite definite about that.
Yes. It's I've learned a lot of hard lessons, but I've learned that yes, you can point the finger at luck and circumstance and this and that, but ultimately the only thing that ever gets in your way is yourself. And
Right.
whether that comes through lack of belief or confidence, whatever that is, it always comes back to you.
Right.
You are the only person who stops yourself from doing what you truly want to do.
Right. So if that is so, what would your other self tell you?
You mean the one trying to stop me?
Well, let's start with that one. What would
Okay.
your other self tell you that stops you?
That stops me. Well, it doesn't anymore, but I would say in the past, like anybody, I've not always chosen the easiest paths. And I've had to deal with a lack of confidence. I've had to deal with, like getting out of my own way, being willing to take chances. But this all goes back to what I was talking about don't be number one. Don't be, like don't outshine anyone else. Like don't be the best you can be. Like you're taught, to be quiet, to be demure, like make sure that everybody likes you. And that doesn't serve you. And so you have to unlearn those things. But it also brings like like you're terrified to put yourself out there.
Mm.
And you have to teach yourself to do this. You only learn by doing. You
Right.
only learn by being scared.
Right.
I always go back to this David Bowie quote that I love, where he talks about, you know, that you're doing something correct when you're in the dark, in the deep end of the pool, and you can't touch the bottom anymore. And
Right.
so instead of fighting that feeling and thinking you're going to
Yeah.
sink, you enjoy that feeling and know that you are right on the brink of where you need to be. And I think of that all the time, and I try to place myself in those situations
Mm.
daily
Mm.
to be more bold, because I
Mm.
know that fear is a good driver for me. And so I make it my friend and I make it work for me.
So you've just answered your own question.
I know.
£50, please. No.
I know. I was like, wow, I feel like I've been under the microscope.
Oh, but it's interesting, isn't it? It really is interesting about what drives us and what do we need and what gets in our way, and are we cognizant of that? Do we know that, sorry, or are we drifting? And if that's almost like a death, isn't it? That we don't need, and it's that stuff that keeps us going. And I think that some of the things you just said right now are incredibly inspiring to other women. I think
Oh,
that's
that would be
remarkable.
lovely.
I think that's remarkable. I think that what you said then is desperately needed right now.
Thank you. That would be remarkable.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay then. Done. So you've talked a lot. You've mentioned an enormous amount of things. Okay, an enormous amount of things, and we've gone into the Gothic, and we've explored what you need to actually be creative and to explore the self, and get the essences of, you just said it. You need to be scared
Yeah.
to almost celebrate the fear, to be creative, to allow the self to be creative. I mean, a lot of people who are creative battle with that quite a lot.
Yeah.
Creative people have in the past, going way back 1700s, 1600s, stuff like this, have been accused of being mad, of being accused of being unhinged and disjointed, or a genius, or the other side of it, or somebody who has one spark moments and they burn out like the flame of a candle and stuff like this. And the way you talk about your work is very bright and very fiery, Scarlett, and I think that our listeners really appreciate that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you for that.
No, that's lovely. So we're kind of drawing to the end of our podcast. It's almost an hour. It didn't feel like an hour, right?
I think we've been going for an hour. Wow.
Yeah, that's absolutely super. I think we'll talk again. Obviously, if you don't mind, we'll do another podcast and see what you're doing then, next year. I don't know, and I do wonder whether you would like to take that thought you had about creative Gothic stuff being a course for people to, explore their ideals and fears, and get reinvigorated because of that. I can see people wanting to do that course, Scarlett.
Yeah, no, I would love it. We should talk further. I would definitely be up for that.
Well, we've got a super spooky house for you, which is haunted as hell. It gave me the creeps more than I've experienced for a while. Okay, lasted.
Okay, I'm a ghost magnet, right? They love me.
No, that's okay. That's all right. That's good. Well, we'll talk. Let's see what we can do.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, it's lovely. But thank you so much, Scarlett. Thank you today for joining us. And I've had a wild time. I've really enjoyed it, but I'm hoping our listeners have too. And there's more. I'm sure there's more.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Okay. Well, travel well, go and scare people. I want everybody to watch the video and get in touch with their scared self, because actually it's waiting to come out and it's waiting to tell you something. So let's do a little bit more of that, shall we? That would be super cool.
When the moment's right, only moments rise. For lesser blessed, it's all promises. When the dawners rise, from their comas rise. For the lesser blessed, it seems honest here.